Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for Promoting the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA-USA. IPA-USA is a USA affiliate of the International Play Association. You can find more about IPA World by visiting their website at ipaworld.org or about IPA-USA by going to our website at IPA-USA.org. As part of our efforts to promote play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats, and these are conversations with people who are just as passionate about play as we are. You can find those Porch Play Chats by going to our website at IPA-USA.org. Up in that top right-hand corner, you'll see our link to our YouTube page and our Facebook page. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, be a friend on our Facebook page, and magically, every Monday, a new Porch Play Chat will appear in your feed. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm the president of IPA-USA. And with me on the porch is Lisa Murphy. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, nice to see everyone.
And Peter Pizzolongo is our guest today. Peter is the president of the Early Education Consulting Firm and a former vice president of the Delaware County AEYC Governing Board. He's held the positions of training and technical assistance coordinator of the National Center on Early Childhood Education, Teaching and Learning at 0 to 3, and was the associate director for professional development at NAEYC and the director of the Analytical Support and Technical Assistance Services Division, OMG, of OSR Incorporated, which was the social sciences research and management support firm. So over 30 years of experience as an author, trainer, technical assistance provider, program evaluator, Head Start and childcare agency administrator and teacher in the human services field. So Peter is here to talk about assessing children through play. Peter, we're so glad to have you.
Oh, great.
What do you mean?
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that?
What?
Assessing children through play.
Assessing children through play. Yeah, it was interesting because when we started talking about what we wanted to talk about with play and going back to my roots, when I was in grad school, I remember one of the courses you have to take is the child assessment course, and it's all about how to administer the Minnesota multi-phase MMPI and the Brigands and my very smart academic advisor who taught that course said, all of those tests come with instructions. You're smart. You can read the instructions and figure out how to do it. But what I want you really to do is to learn how to observe children and through that assess where they are and where you think they want to go next, et cetera. And what are their strengths, what are their interests, what are their areas of need. And she stuck me in an environment with toddlers, and that's how I learned to assess children through play. And that was very radical in the 1970s. Actually, we didn't even use the word assessment in early childhood in the 1970s. It was verboten. But it's like, but we're all observing children and figuring out what they do and what they can do. So that's where that came from. So I think we need to start with some givens. One, of course, that everybody who's on who views these chats will know that children are natural players. They just pop out and they want to start playing right away. Playing, pooping, and eating. That's their three biggies. And that when children play, it serves a number of purposes for them. It's fun, it's creative, it's how they solve problems, etc. All smart animals have a period of play in their lives. The primates, certainly, dogs, cats. A friend of mine told me recently, crows play as well.
Oh, yeah.
I hadn't really thought of that, but they like play tricks on each other. So they're among the smarter birds, apparently. And then the other thing is, I think of play as two ways. One, it's the children's right to play. They are natural players. And the other piece of it is, my hand's higher. The other piece of it is that as early childhood educators, we value that, and then we use play for teaching. And then therefore, we also need to use play for assessing as well. So that's where I'm coming from on this. Now I want to do a little assessment 101, or the assessment police will come after us. So,
Oh yeah, that's true. They will.
So, so when I look at what is assessment, I go to, our favorite, here we go. NAEYC's Developmentally Appropriate Practice Position Statement, and the very heavy, now 400 some pages, book. Get out of the snow there.
There you go. Oh, close.
By the way, it's not snowing where I am, but it's actually pouring rain, but the snow is a better picture than the pouring rain picture.
Yeah.
So NAEYC defines, and DAP defines assessment as a systematic means of collecting and documenting information about children's learning and development, to monitor children's progress toward learning goals, to make curriculum decisions, and to improve teaching practices. So nothing crazy about that. And that statement they took from National Research Council in 2008 had published, what was it called? It was called Early Childhood Assessment, What, Why, and How. And so that was their definition, and AEYC has adopted it. So we know as early childhood educators, we use assessment to gather information about what children know and can and are able to do. And in that way, we can understand their development and support their growth and their learning.
And Peter, what I didn't hear in that statement was, and you use testing. I didn't hear that.
Like drinking. Well, no, actually one can. And I do want to get into that. Essentially, assessment has 3 steps. We gather information about the children through observation, and there might be some other assessment methods that one uses as well. We document that information, and then we reflect on that information so that we know what is learned about the children and how they grow and how they develop and how they learn. So there are several purposes to assessment, and play has a role more in some of those purposes than in others. So we often talk about developmental screening, and that is, particularly for those that are in Head Start programs, early Head Start, school-based programs. They are required to do screening, and all should. And screening is a quick method to identify children who have potential disabilities. Usually it involves a norm reference test that says this is what children are expected to do at this stage of development, and this is where your child is. Now, the screening should be more than just the test, because when you've got a kid in your program, your center or your family child care home program or your part day preschool, et cetera, from day one, you know something about this child. And so you might be administering the screening test, the Brigance, or someone might be administering it, but you are also observing the child in play and in interacting with you, interacting with each other, solo play, et cetera. And that is also useful information as well. So sometimes, now this is heresy, you might get a kid who tests in the normal range on the screening test, but as a teacher, something makes you twitch a little about this kid. There's just something, and so you might be making a referral for further testing based on what you've observed, as well as information from families, because sometimes the kid at home is very different from the kid in the center or your family child care home. So getting that information and sharing that, which then, if you've made a referral, it moves on to another purpose, which is usually called the Diagnostic Evaluation. And that's when some specialists, psychiatrists, psychologists, et cetera, will do some more testing and then determine this is a kid who has an identifiable disability or a child who doesn't. And so, that's how you end up with an individualized education plan, et cetera.
So there's a purpose for those standardized tests, but they're not in a typical classroom if you don't have a concern about development, right? So, there's always a place, and the two screening tools that I love that don't require a testing of an individual child are the Devereux Early Childhood Assessment, which is parent report and teacher report, and then you figure it out, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other one, I love the Ages and Stages questionnaire, because you can just observe children and get it, right? And you don't have to do, and then if you're concerned, sure, then you talk to the family and make a referral. But in a normal, typical developing classroom where you might have a child with some special circumstances, you don't have to go so far as those diagnostics. You may certainly need to eventually, but there's so much we can do in a classroom. And there's so many children that are on this developmental continuum based on their previous experiences, that if we just observe them and figure out where they are and then do our own sort of scaffolding for them based on those observations, we may never need to it may not be so severe that it needs to move up and away into that screening. Not that we shouldn't do it if we're really concerned, but
right.
that, sometimes I think we do it to get out of other stuff.
Ooh, heresy. Well, and I think depending on what kind of a program you're in, some programs require the developmental screening within the first 45 days of enrollment.
Yeah.
Some programs, it's within the first 90 days or 3 months. And if you're thinking about a toddler and a young preschooler, and this is their first group experience, it's like on day 2, we're going to say, so what color is this? And tell me the shape. And, and the kid's going to go, mostly I'm just afraid of you at this moment. I know the information you're asking me, but I choose not to tell you because I don't know who the heck you are. So, but, when children are playing, as they naturally would be, and you're observing and recording and then using that information in reflection later on, then you've set up a system where I know what the kid can do. And I know, then I know where we can possibly go next. And one of the things I want to point out is, often it's, I know what the child can do. So what can he do next? I thought, how about he can do this and he likes doing this. Let's strengthen it. It's not always about where do you go next. It's like everything is not preparation for the next thing.
Whoa. Are you from another country? Are you not based in the United States?
I'm from the planet Zorg, and that's how we think on the planet Zorg. It's like, I can, look, lady, I can do this. Let me do it.
Yeah,
let me practice. The thing that I'm good at. So now you want me to fail at something else? Oh, thank you so much. So
welcome to your education system.
Yeah. So what we're mostly talking about is the classroom-based assessment that teachers use all the time to monitor what the children are doing. And then, based on this information, do I need to adjust the curriculum? Do I need to adjust the environment? Do I need to adjust the way I interact with this child? So you've got that information, and then that's how you use it.
And I'm gonna toss in there that the closer our programs actually get to being a play-oriented program and not a 20-minute chopped up letter of the day, number of the day, everybody move, transition, the more our program actually turns into adults bearing witness to free choice, independent play, then we start to see that I'm able to gather all of that information through my observation. And because I'm not overly focused on, I have to wrap this up to get to circle time, I have nothing but time to allow their knowledge to come to surface for me to observe, right? Because it's going to happen because we're not overly focused on some of that adult-driven, adult agenda stuff.
Yeah. And, and so many children are in full-day childcare programs where they're there for what, 8, 9, 10, maybe up to 11 hours.
Yeah,
it's like,
crazy.
What's the rush? We have 11 hours here. Now, part of that is eating, part of that is pooping and peeing, and part of that is eating. But other than that, there's 40 minutes devoted to memorizing the calendar. No, that was a joke. We're not doing that. So
no, you're not doing that.
Now, the other thing, when I was at NAEYC, we had funding to develop a classroom-based assessment training program, and so we developed it. Judy Jablon was the primary author. I think many folks know and love and adore Judy Jablon, as I do. And so we were field testing it, and we were on the 3rd session. We did, on Saturdays for childcare staff. So we did one every Saturday. And on the 3rd one of the teachers, like, she had the light bulb went off. You could almost see it. And she stood up and said, oh, we're assessing what children can do, not what they can't do. And I thought we had said that, but if we did, she didn't get, because she was just so used to assessment was about, he doesn't know his letters, he doesn't know his numerals, his numbers, that it was, so, then we started really focusing. It's a strengths-based approach. What can children do? And that's what you're observing, that's what you're documenting, and that's what you're using in your planning. Now, knowing what children can do, you can figure out what they can't do, or what they can't do yet, is what we typically like.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that when we are observing children through play, that we're looking for the strengths, we're looking for the interests. We're doing it in a way that's objective. We're not making stuff up, and I want to get into that shortly. So I wrote a little vignette with Mr. Peter as the teacher. So I'll share the vignette. So Mr. Peter set up an activity with hoops and buttons, and the children toss the buttons into the hoops. So, you don't have to tell them much. Just, here's the hoops, here's some buttons. I think it'd be fun to toss the buttons into the hoops. So now we have Joey. Most of his buttons land in the hoop, and each time he missed, he said, oh, well, and he picked up the next button to toss. And after tossing all of his buttons, he counted the buttons that are in the hoop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he did, he had that one-on-one correspondence, and he counted the buttons that were outside of the hoop. 1, 2, 3. And he said, well, most of mine landed in the hoop. So Phoebe, most of her buttons land in the hoop as well. And then for each button in the hoop, she said, I did it. 2 of them landed outside the hoop. And she got mad at those buttons. And for each of them, she said, you are a silly button. You are in the wrong place. And when she was done, she looked at the buttons. Now, 4 of them were on this side of the hoop, and 5 of them were on that side of the hoop. And without counting, she went, I see 4 over there and 5 over there. Mr. Peter, how many buttons does that make? So that's our Phoebe. Now, Mike, most of his buttons landed outside the hoop. Only 3 landed inside the hoop. And then when he was done tossing them, he said, I'm really not very good at this. I'm going to do something else. And he left, and he went to the block area. So a teacher observing this we hope would be writing it down as it was happening. And you have your teacher shorthand as to how you can write your notes. When I started teaching back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, we all wore coveralls. That was like the uniform of the preschool teacher, because it has so many pockets, and each pocket had a bunch of index cards in it. So you could just pull out a card and a pen and just jot down quickly and then stuff the card back in. Because you're, even if you're not in the action, you're there with the kids. You don't want to be sitting there going like this the whole time, or, these days on your iPad or your laptop or your phone. So the teacher's got to be observing what's happening, and then and do it in a way that I made up a new acronym, OSAC, Objective, Specific, Accurate, and Complete. I didn't make up those words. I stole them from someplace. I think I stole them from when I worked at the Council for Professional Recognition on the CDA system. I think that's where I got those from. So objective, you're writing only what you see. You're not jumping to the conclusion. So like with Phoebe, the one who said, oh, there's 4 over there and there's 5 over there. You go, Phoebe can subitize. Well, you don't know that yet. You only have 1 instance. Maybe she was just doing a lucky guess. So, in my mind, I'm thinking that's what subitizing is, but let's, I need multiple observations to see if she's really capable of doing that right now. So you've got to be objective. You've got to just write down what you saw. You've got to be specific. You have to write down, that Joey tossed the buttons underhand, and then this one landed here and that one. So you've got to give that information, not just, Joey tossed buttons into the hoop. Now put the card back in my pocket.
Some of the details.
You gotta have those details. You have to be accurate. You're not supposed to make things up while you're observing. And then sometimes teachers will say, well, at the end of the day, I write down everything that happened.
Oh, no.
Yeah, unless you've got this amazing brain, you really can't remember all those details. You're gonna start making stuff up. So you've got to be accurate and you got to be complete. You want to write, figure out this is the whole scene. The scene is the child that I had 3 children with me and they started tossing. And then at the end, some of them were counting how many buttons. So that's when you've got the information that you need because it's objective, specific, accurate, and complete. OSAC, that sounds like one of those military words.
It does. But that's a beautiful example. I mean, I saw math, right? I saw gross motor, or I listened, and that's what I heard in the scenario. I heard confidence and persistence.
Flexibility.
I heard an array of standards,
of evidence
to loop them, right?
Yeah.
I heard tons of things that each of these children could do. And I want to go back to the strength-based versus deficit-based too. Have you ever seen Animal School, the video on YouTube? No, you've got to go search YouTube for Animal School because it does exactly what you were talking about initially, where, we look and see what they're not good at. So we take them away from what they're good at. So then they're not so good at what they were good at. And they're really not good at what they're not good at, right? It's the whole thing with animals. And the eagle and the squirrel and the kangaroo, and how we deplete children's confidence and focus on the wrong things is what that whole little story is about. It's an amazing video that every time I show it to my teachers, and we were talking about observation and assessment, they go, oh, I do that. Or I was that child in that. I was that animal when I was growing up. Or that's how I felt in school. It's very, very relevant to their own experiences, which makes them really have aha moments. And it's short.
Yet
it's like
you still have to show the video.
Yeah, you still have to show the video.
I'm just saying, how many years have you been showing that video?
Oh yeah.
Oh right. Yeah.
That's my point. Is
25 years I've been showing that video, but it's to a new group of students, right?
Yeah.
So at least they're getting the aha moment. But it's powerful, Peter, and goes to exactly what you're saying. We need to be asset-based, not deficit-based, because children lose confidence when they're not provided the thing, able to do the things. I mean, Gardner taught us that. He said, don't focus on the intelligences they don't have, use the ones they do have, right?
Well, and focusing on what they do, I love saying that, and then meeting them there, and then developing the relationship. So if it is age and developmentally appropriate, to circle back to some of the things that they're maybe struggling with. But if there's no relationship, it doesn't matter how crafted your intervention is. The kid has no connection or caring piece with you. So it's not going to matter at all. The other thing I want to toss in here, and it's a little bit, and I'm looking at the time here, I don't want it to derail, but I want to at least throw it in, is that the more mixed ages are present in the space, the less hyper-focused we get on thinking that somebody is off track. Because having the mix with the olders and the youngers is going to make a little bit of room for this kid who's able to keep up here and this kid who doesn't quite have it yet, but is able to be with a peer group. So I'm able to, maybe at first I notice what he or she is not doing, but I also see the real positive interaction that they're having with the others. And so I might be going, okay, we're going to sit here and celebrate what they are good at for a little bit before we get overly focused on this over here.
And then you use what they're really good at to get their interest in what they're not so good at, right? I do the story of the little boy with blocks, who I was the director. He was brand new, been there for 2 weeks. The teacher walks into my office and says, he's only playing in blocks. That's all he does. I said, leave him alone.
Yeah.
And then she comes in 3 days later. He's only playing with blocks. And I said, leave him alone. And then she comes in 2 weeks later and she says, he's only playing with blocks. And I said, okay, I'll come. And so I went in, he came 5 days a week. He loved blocks. So I went in and I said, oh my goodness, look at this structure that you're building. This is pretty amazing. Do you think we could draw that? could you draw that for me? And so sure enough, I went and got him a clipboard and colored pencils off the writing table and brought him over, and he drew his 3-dimensional thing in a 4.5-year-old's ability to draw it. And I said, wow, that is pretty impressive. And so we got him into writing, right? He was like, oh, he went and got the clipboard several times and built with the structures. And then I said, I was thinking maybe we could paint with blocks tomorrow. Could you pick out some blocks for us to paint with? And he was so happy to do that. And I said, would you come over to the block table with the blocks and talk about their shapes? That you came right over. We had him in the art center. And then I said, the girls have been wanting a dollhouse. Do you think you could help them build one with blocks in the dramatic play? I mean, it's just you use what they're interested in.
Yeah.
And you pull them out. And I mean, he was everywhere after a while and everyone said
he felt useful, right? Like, I am a contributor.
Oh, finally, somebody gets me.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's one of the beauties of the early childhood environment, is that every one of those learning centers or interest areas is the place where all the domains come into play. So it's not like, oh, it's blocks, must be a fine motor and maybe a little gross motor if the block is heavy. Well, no, it's a lot more than that. I mean, this is the kid's primary interest, which is just fine. And then, as you were saying, Deb, then you just bring in all these other pieces, and it's like I've never been in a block area where a sign doesn't suddenly appear.
Exactly.
That somebody decided we needed to have a sign, and then one of the kids who can print started working on it, and then the other, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I can do that too. So all that happens, and if you're the good teacher will be there pulling out those index cards and going, oh my goodness, look at all of this. Yeah, I've got enough information. And, then the other piece of it, and I don't want to lose this part, because sometimes, here's my observation of the last 50 years of working with teachers, is that so even when they get really good at that objective, specific, accurate, and complete recording while they're observing, the next piece is tougher. The next piece is, okay, I've got all these index cards. I've got samples of their children's work. I've got information from parents. I've got information from specialists that have been in my room. Now I have to pull this all together and look at my educational goals, my child learning outcomes, whatever your program calls them, and say, so how does what I'm seeing compare with what it is that we say the children are supposed to know and do during this year in our program? So that's a difficult piece, and it's like you have to, and I still don't know when teachers really do that. The glorious nap time that we hear about, where the children are sleeping and then you can write your novel. It's like, I don't know, when the children were napping, I was usually pretty exhausted, and I was just sitting there rubbing backs, and trying to stay awake myself. So I had lunch too. Well, I'm tired now. So, unfortunately, a lot of this happens after hours for teachers, but it's so important to be able to take this raw data that you have and then do this analysis. And then you typically have to document it on, if you're using the gold or the high scope core, or whatever system that you're using, that's where you do that documentation. But somewhere between, I've observed this and I wrote it down, and now I'm putting it on, well, I guess you're typing it, I'm putting it on in this form, you've got to do that analysis in there. And that's
that analysis that we don't give early childhood people enough credit for is to say, at some point in your career, you're going to see indicators of a red flag of areas that you're going to be but that you might need to pay attention to. So to jump through all of those hoops constantly, if what you're seeing right now is kind of like on a developmental the continuum that is not indicating me needing to be worried, I think at that point we need to trust the process of play and development, and not continue to have to document absolutely everything, because it is a time suck. It is a time suck, you know, to make sure on the front end that our staff are trained and competent to be able to identify red flags. Do I have any reason to think that this kid is not going to be able to be here based on what I'm seeing right now? And if the answer is no, I think we leave it alone. I think we are just expecting, and I know you guys know this, and we're preaching to the choir, just the scads and mountains of paperwork and assessment that are getting in the way of caring connections and relationships and us actually being together with the children. And I forever and a day have believed that if some program and entity is needing that level of observation and assessment on an ongoing basis, then somebody needs to be brought in to do it, because then, so I can do my job. Yeah, because somebody else is requiring this information. So that somebody, in my belief, is the one that bears the responsibility of coming in and gathering it. My job is to hold the space and to create that environment where you can gather some of that data.
I think, you know, and that's not only in our field. I think in all fields, scientists, you know, social scientists, physical scientists, etc., will say, what are you using this information for? If you don't know what you're using it for, then why are you gathering it? Exactly. So, you know, so there's pertinent information that you're going to get while you're observing children at play, and that's the information that you need. But, you know, there's other noise, and, you know, you don't need to be writing down things all day. The other thing is authentic assessment is a phrase that many people use, and, you know, you're assessing what's really happening, as opposed to pulling a kid out of the room and telling them do this, do this, do this. So if the natural environment is the child is playing, so sometimes we're out of the action and we're observing and we're just, you know, we're smiling and we're nodding, providing that kind of reinforcement, but we're not interrupting the play.
Correct.
Sometimes we're in the play, and it's kind of tricky then when you're in the, particularly if it's, you know, in the dramatic play area and you have a role, and you're also trying to write things down on the side. So that's a little harder. And then sometimes you're there and you're not one of the players, but you're there to ask questions and make comments while you're documenting. And when you do it in an open-ended way, you get the best information. So simple things like, tell me about what you're doing. Tell me what you see. Tell me everything you know about these blocks. Now, I love that kind of a question, as opposed to what is the shape of the block or what is the color of the block? Because if you say, tell me everything you know about these blocks, you're going to get all this information. You know, one kid's going to say, they're really heavy, I have trouble picking them up. And other kids will say, well, that one is a rectangle and this one is a triangle. But, okay, little smarty, okay, got that. So, you know, so you've got this, and then you can get into the, well, what do you think might happen if we put this really long block on top of this one? So then, you know, you've asked that question. And so I'm writing down, and, you know, and when I used to do this, it's like for each, I had my standard open-ended questions. And so I could just number it. So question number 2 is tell me all you remember. So I just write Q2, and then I can write down what the kid said. So I think teachers develop a good shorthand for doing this. The other thing I suggest is if you're stuck with, you know, it's like our brains automatically want to go to, tell me what the shape is, tell me what the color is, tell me what the number is. I don't know. I think that's because we were all bombarded with those questions when we were kids. So I tell teachers, take these open-ended phrases, write them down, and then hang them on the wall way up high, because you're not putting anything else up there, right? Because all the children's artwork is at, you know, their eye level. So so when you're stuck, you just look up and go, tell me what you think about that. You know, how did that make you feel? So you've got to leave these little prompts, and then you can get that information that you want on these kids without resorting to testing questions. Now, teachers say to me, can I never ask them how many there are? And I said, you know, here's the thing. If a child has never provided that information to you, and you're not sure if he knows how to count, then go ahead and ask him. I wouldn't do it during group time. I, you know, do it individually. So it's not a sin to do that, but that's not going to be the primary focus. And also, you know, you'll hear teachers say, well, I teach them by asking them those kinds of questions. But you're not teaching them, you're testing them.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Oh, such a big, huge point. Peter, I want to go back to one thing that Lisa said as we get ready to wrap up, because it's time. We have another person coming in, but I agree with what Lisa said, and I'm sure you do too, that sometimes the assessments that are required by the funders could be reduced to a few less questions per domain
You can get
of development.
all that information, all of it. And then I want you, so if you have to fill it out or you're going to get fired, then you give yourself an hour to do nothing, to shut your mouth, to not do anything, no interrupting. How much of it can you fill out?
Yeah.
Before, like first line of intervention is what data can I provide without having to interrupt in order to gather information that is 100% for an adult agenda.
Well, and the other big piece is how many fine motor questions should there be? I mean, I've looked at some of them and there are 15.
Like, one is probably enough.
Yeah. Build a tower of 10 cubes. That seems to be, I think St. Peter must ask you to do that when you get to the pearly gate. It seems to be so important. Build a tower with 10 cubes. Not 9, not 11. 10.
Not 11.
It has to be 10. So as we're wrapping up, I think, Peter, you've raised some fabulous points around being authentic in your assessment, providing large blocks of time for children to initiate their own play so that you have time to observe. Because, you know, teachers say, well, the room will go out of control. The room will not go out of control if children are doing what they're interested in doing and playing where they're interested in playing. And one of you, typically there's 2 teachers in a room. One of you can be observing and one of you can be roaming if you need to. But not necessarily will you need to do that if you give children practice in allowing themselves to choose where they want to play and who they want to play with and how long they want to stay there. So, you know, I think we take a very complex and difficult profession and we make it harder. I really think we do.
Yeah, we make it harder for the wrong reasons too.
Yes, we're making it harder for the wrong reasons when it should be joyful and exciting. And you're curious about what you'll discover today about the children and what they're interested in. And instead it's become drudgery, and it's because of all this craziness that we're requiring teachers to do and all that crazy paperwork that they don't have time to do. So as we wrap up, I think you've done a fabulous job of giving us wonderful stories and examples and vignettes about what you can learn just by documenting an objective observation and gathering that data. And I like the idea about the you know, here's the questions and how you do that. It's a shortcut that everybody is always looking for. So I think that's really wonderful. So don't go anywhere as I close this out. So for more information about IPA-USA, please visit our website at IPA-USA.org. And until next time, keep on playing.
Bye.
Bye.